in a series this Christmas season, our Christmas series called Unwrapping Christmas. And what we've attempted to do through this series is just unwrap a few gifts that God has given us through the Christmas season. Obviously, the gift of Jesus. We looked at that passage in Isaiah some 700 years before Jesus was born, where Isaiah prophesied that a child is born, a son is given, and his name will be called Wonderful, Counselor, Everlasting Father, Mighty God, Prince of Peace, Emmanuel, God with us. He prophesied that over 700 years before Jesus came, and then Jesus came. A child born, a son given to us. John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only son, that whoever believes in him will have everlasting life. It's powerful. It's powerful. And so we're unwrapping these gifts at Christmas time that God has given us through this. And so the first week, we looked at the gift of hope. And we talked about how we cannot put our hope into anything other than Jesus. Because everything else, whether it's that person beside you, or whether it's the money in the bank, or it's some kind of security you feel, all of that will let you down. But Jesus will never forsake you. He will never let you down. So our hope must be in Jesus. God gives us this hope at Christmas time through Jesus. We looked at joy. We unwrapped the gift of joy. I just encourage you, that message is on our website now. You can go to mybetterlife.church, click on the teaching series, and find the message on joy, because if you weren't here, we tapped into some joy, just a little. And I know more is coming to this church. And I had a testimony. A lady came to me and said, that week, we had a huge trial come, my husband and I, and you know what we did? We laughed at it. I know that sounds weird to some people, but Jesus said, my joy I give to you, so that your joy will remain full. We're not looking for joy from our circumstances. We choose joy. We choose this gift of joy. And last week we looked at peace, which is very similar, because Jesus gave us his peace as well. He is the Prince of Peace. And we talked about how our peace has to come from him. If it doesn't come from him, it's not true peace. The peace that the world offers is not true peace. And we all know that. It has to come from Jesus. So this week, we're going to unwrap the gift of love. The gift of love. I love teaching on love. It's one of my favorite topics to talk about. Because Jesus, at the end, when he was with his disciples, he said, I'm going to take all of the 613 commandments that are in the Old Testament, and I'm going to leave you with one command. This one command I leave you, to love each other the way that I have loved you. He says, by this, all men will know that you are my disciples, by your love one for another. It's crazy. People aren't going to know that you're a Jesus disciple because how much you go to church. People aren't going to know that you're a Jesus disciple because how much you give, or how many holy words, the Christianese that we talk. Oh, brother, holy, how art thou, while thouest. That's not how they know. Jesus said they'll know that you're my follower that you are my disciple by your love for one another. I love teaching on love. It is an amazing thing. Love is powerful. Love is powerful. So I want to unwrap this gift of love, but I want to go in a specific area. And I want to look at how love forgives. Love forgives. As we unwrap this gift, Pinky and I we have two different views, and we come from two different standpoints when it comes to forgiveness. We really do. We're kind of opposite, really. I was getting this message. I said, hey, babe, I'm going to talk about us a little bit. You okay with that? And she's like, But I shared a little bit of this with you when we were talking about peace, but I'm naturally like a peacemaker. It's just my personality. I want to fix things really quick. And so there are times when I say something stupid or I hurt her or I make her upset, that I'm just quick, oh, I'm sorry, babe. I'm sorry, just trying to fix it. I'm sorry. That's my bad. I messed up. I'm sorry. And I run to it super quick. But sometimes she can tell that it's more of a reaction on my part rather than just a heartfelt apology. And she can feel that sometimes, where it's just, I'm just trying to fix it, rather than me taking a second and thinking, oh, wow, I really did hurt her feelings here, and I really am sorry. I'm just like, hey, I'm sorry, let's get over it, Can you get over it? Can we move on? Well, she's kind of like the opposite, okay? And so she grew up in where forgiveness is something you've got to earn. You've got to really be sorry before I offer my forgiveness. And she comes from this place, and really, for her to offer forgiveness, she's really got to feel sorry. And so neither one of us are hitting it right. We're just coming at it from two different angles. And we go through this, and with her, to offer an apology back to me, something that she did, maybe she hurt my feelings. If she doesn't feel like anything was wrong with that, I sometimes don't get an apology, right? Am I telling the truth? And so we come with that. You guys know how I am. I'm a little too optimistic. I'm a little too outgoing sometimes. And so there was a time in our lives we were doing ministry. I would just invite people over to the house. And I wouldn't even tell her. And then I would forget. And it's like the day before. And I'm like, oh, hey, babe, I invited so-and-so over, and you got to cook. And she's like, what? And so, and then I'm like, I'm sorry, baby. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. And I'm just quick to react, and we actually had to work through this a little bit because I'm just being so insensitive to her and just making plans without even talking to her. And so, we've dealt with, everybody deals with their things. Everybody has their things in their lives. But that's a little bit of how because Pinky and I, we need to work on this area in our relationship. But I just feel like this is something that we all need to work on. Whether you come from one standpoint or the other, or maybe some totally different standpoint, forgiveness is something that we all should work on, because forgiveness is tricky. Forgiveness is tricky. And really, we're taught growing up, and we're shown growing up, that somebody needs to deserve to be forgiven before we offer our forgiveness. I mean, that's kind of the world way, right? When you're out in the world and they're like, oh, you don't deserve an apology for that. You know what you did? And so we take on that same language. They don't deserve my forgiveness. You know what they did to me? They made me so mad. Or they hurt me so bad. There's no way I can forgive them. There's no way. I don't know if I can ever get over this. It's a reality. It's what we face. They never change. It's the same thing over and over. I forgive them and then they just do it again. And I forgive them again and they do it again over and over. I'm done forgiving. I'm done with all that. It's what we do. It's what we say. And in our close relationships, this really happens. Our marriages, our friendships, our close friendships. Seems like the closer we get, the harder these things are. With our kids, our parents, and so our grandkids even. I mean, it's all across the board with our relationships. And husbands and wives are so different. Let's just say men and women we're made so different. Guys, can I take up for you for just a second? Because us guys, listen, women, you know this, but I got to tell you, ladies, a lot of times we don't know. We don't have a clue. We don't have a clue. You're over there with mad and pouting with your feelings all hurt. We have no idea what happened. We don't think that way. We're a little bit more simple, And so we're over here like, what happened? So first step, I got to figure out why she's upset, what I did. How did I hurt her feelings? What I do? That's why I got the automatic switch. Pinky gets upset. I'm just like, hey, I'm sorry. What are you sorry for? I don't know, but I'm sorry. But we're so different. We're so different in our marriages, Things happen and then we're like, I'm not talking to you for the rest of the day. Silent treatment, you know what I'm talking about. Then, hey, listen, ladies, guys, I don't know if I want to share the secret or not. But there's just sometimes when you give us the silent treatment, we're like, whew. I'm just gonna enjoy this for a few minutes. Let me go see if the game's on. Wow. Like, can I get like a time frame of when the silent treatment's gonna happen? Because there's a good game on, and I don't want the silent treatment to be over in like the last few minutes of the game. Can we just? Sorry, guys, I told on us. It's our secret. It is. It truly is. But ladies, if you gotta give the silent treatment, Piggy, it's okay. I understand. But that's what we do. I'm not talking to them. They made me mad. Then you go to bed, And then they try to apologize. Guys, there's people like me, or ladies, you just might be the same way. You're peacemakers. You're like, hey, I'm sorry. I really am. I'm sorry. Is there any way we can get through this? And the other person's like, hey, no. And we just keep this going. And sometimes there's some deep hurts. There's some deep frustrations that we go through, that people hurt us and people make us upset. There's times when something is done or said and families, they don't even speak to each other for years, for decades. I can't tell you how many times I've heard somebody say, oh, I haven't spoken with that person for over a year. I haven't spoken with my parent, the parent, for years. That uncle or that brother, that sister. It happens. Especially when both sides think they deserve the apology. Well, when they apologize to me, then I'll apologize to them. But if they don't call me, I ain't calling them. You know what they did to me? Sometimes it happens at work. Somebody takes credit for something that you did. You're looking at them like, and the bosses, they're giving them all the praise, and you did all the work. Like, I ain't friends with that dude no more. I'll never forgive him for what he knows what he did. He knows what he did. Or we share a secret with a friend. When I say a secret, it's something, something you're going through, something you're dealing with, and you need somebody to talk to, and you've got a close friend, and you confide in them, and you talk to them, and they're the only one. Then all of a sudden, you hear Sister so-and-so over here talking about it. And you're like, that your friend was the only person you told. And now it's all over the place. I'll never forgive her for that. And you're embarrassed. People know about your business that you had no intentions on them knowing. And you're just like, I will never forgive her for that. I probably won't even speak to her again. This stuff happens. And listen, I don't even hardly want to touch those of us who have been through some very bad traumas in our life. Whether it's abuse of some kind, or whether it's something just tragic in your life. I mean, honestly, when you think about those moments, to talk about forgiveness to you after what you've been through, for me to stand here and talk about forgiveness to you, who are you? There's some traumas that are that big. There's some things that we've been through that are that huge. And this really happens in church. I mean, I am fighting this. I am fighting this at Better Life Church. We will not be a church like this. But this kind of stuff gets in the middle of our congregation, of our brothers and sisters. And so-and-so said this, and she did that, and I'm not going to forgive her. And she, and blah, and it just spreads like cancer. Then all of a sudden, you've got this church that is divided and splitting and whatever. That's not going to be here. That's not going to be us. Then people get upset and they leave. They leave church. No matter what God says, they're out of there because of this stuff that happens in church. And really, you know what? I'm going to say this. As a guy, I know that these situations that we're talking about, these people don't really deserve forgiveness. Naturally, especially the traumas and things like that, they don't deserve it. But what if, because of Christmas, because of what God has done, sending Jesus to the earth, his son, what if forgiveness isn't about what is deserved? What if that's not the key to this? What if it's about reflecting the love that God, reciprocating the love that God has given us? What if it's about reflecting that back to other people? And forgiveness is one of those things. Paul writes about this in his great love chapter, 1 Corinthians chapter 13. You can look at that chapter. Listen, I encourage you, if you're struggling with your love walk, if you're struggling with this whole love message ever, at any time, go to 1 Corinthians 13. Read that chapter, and then read it again, and then read it again. And at the end of that chapter, in verse 13, Paul writes this. He says, "And now abide faith, hope, and love." These three. These three are what will last forever. Faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. Love is the most powerful. Okay, I'm a faith preacher, man. I love talking about faith. And you're telling me that love is more powerful than faith? I'm not saying it. Paul's saying it. And as Jesus followers, people who believe in Jesus, we believe in him. We believe in all the finished works of Jesus, and we've never even seen him. Not with our natural eyes. Some people see him in the spirit. But we've never seen Jesus physically, and yet we believe. We are people of faith. And yet he says that love is greater than faith. So we should definitely be people of love. We should be people who love. If we believe in Jesus at all, we should be people who love. In Galatians, Paul writes that faith works by love. So if you're a faith person and you're believing God for your salvation, you're believing God for prosperity or whatever, if you don't have love, forget it. Forget it. This is some strong stuff right now. But I'm going to show it to you in the Word. I'm not going to say it. He's going to say it. Let's look at this. And forgiveness is one of the greatest expressions of love. Because they don't deserve it. They don't deserve to be loved. And yet, you offer it. Let's look at this passage in Mark 11. Now, as faith people, Mark 11 is a powerful passage. Mark 11, 23, 24 are some powerful words from Jesus himself. And I want to take a look at it, and we're going to keep going. So let's start in verse 22. Jesus is talking. Jesus answered and said to them, so this is right after he cursed the fig tree, and the fig tree died the next day. Peter's like, what? This is what he says. Jesus answered and said to them, have faith in God. For assuredly I say to you, whoever says to this mountain, be removed and be cast into the sea, and does not doubt in his heart, but believes those things he says will be done, he will have whatever he says. That's the power that we have. We can speak it and we'll have it. Verse 24, therefore I say to you, whatever things you ask when you pray, believe that you receive them and you will have them. Before we move on, let's just point this out. When do you believe you receive? When you pray, not when you receive. It's weird. It's faith. We believe we receive when we pray. You got to believe it. If you go to God, I'm believing for my healing. And then in the back of your mind is like, well, I'll believe it when I see it. I'll believe it when these symptoms are gone. I'll say, okay, now I'm healed. But that's not what Jesus is saying. Believe you receive when you pray. Right then. If you were in a financial situation where you couldn't pay your bills and I walked up and gave you all the money you needed and a lot more, just overflowing, what would you do? I mean, I'd be like, woo! Yeah! Look what God did. Well, if we believe that we receive when we pray, there should be some praising going on in here. There should be some praising going on when you're praying because I got it. I got it. So powerful, faith scriptures. Now, we got to move on to verse 25. Dun, dun, dun. Verse 25. And whenever you stand praying, if you have anything against anyone, forgive him, that your Father in heaven may also forgive you your trespasses. But if you do not forgive, neither will your Father in heaven forgive your trespasses. Now, I'm going to tell you something. As a grace teacher and a grace believer, I've struggled with this passage in the past. Hold up. I believe in the finished works of Jesus. I believe that it was his obedience that made me righteous. That's the word. And that's the key to this verse, is that you have to interpret the Bible with the Bible. If we pulled this verse out by itself and put it up there and made a doctrine on it, then if you don't forgive, you're going to hell. Well, I don't believe that's what he's saying, because I interpret this passage with the rest of the Bible. We are grace people. We believe in our salvation because of what Jesus has done. And because of what he has done, we now have grace, which is the power to live obediently. That's the order. We don't get that backwards here. It's not, oh, you got to clean your life up, son, before God will love you. No. He sent Jesus. He sent Jesus for that. Jesus made that sacrifice for us. So what is he trying to say here? To have faith is to accept the forgiveness that God has given us. To operate in faith. This is how we're saved. We believe what Jesus has done. So how are we going to operate in other areas of faith if we don't have love and forgiveness? Jesus is saying that this forgiveness is a powerful key to your faith. It's a powerful key to operating in the kingdom, operating in what God has done, what he has done for us. And so Jesus is connecting our faith for our lives with forgiveness to others. If we don't, this is what I'll say. If I saw someone who said, oh, I've got grace. I can go out, man, I can run around on my wife. I can get drunk every night. I got grace. Man, I could even take somebody out if I wanted to. I got grace. I don't think so, bro. I don't think so, dude. What I'm going to say is, you're not even saved. You don't understand the power of grace. You don't understand what God has done for you through Jesus. I question if you're even saved. If you're trying to use grace as a license to sin, you haven't even touched it. You haven't felt it. You haven't experienced what grace really is. Because when grace, a little bit of grace, just a little bit gets on you, and you want to do better. Sure, you might mess up, but every day you're fighting to get better. Every day you're fighting to do more for him and be more for him. And he gives you the grace, which is the power to do it. And so if someone is operating in ultimate unforgiveness, we have to question, where are you at in your faith? Do you really believe what God has done for you? And I think this is what Jesus is bringing out here. Can you really be in faith if you don't forgive? I don't know. John wrote the Gospel of John. He also wrote 3 letters to the church. And in 1 John 3:16, he says this, by this we know love, because he laid down his life for us. And we also ought to lay down our lives for the brethren, for other people. Because of what Jesus has done, we know what love is. Now, in order for us to be like him and to do what he says, we lay our lives down for the brethren, for each other. Now, this was all leading up to this parable that Jesus teaches that, man, oh man, whew, I know I have read this parable and just went on past. You ever read the Bible that way? It's like you're reading this tough stuff in the Bible and it's like, ooh, I got to deal with that later. Like I'm not ready for all that. I think this is one of those parables. So we're going to look at this story that Jesus tells in Matthew chapter 18. So Matthew chapter 18, it starts off like this. We're going to start in verse 20. Then Peter came to him and said, Lord, how often shall my brother sin against me and I forgive him? Up to 7 times? I think that Peter here is like, he thinks he's good. It's like 7 times, right, Lord? Right? Look what Jesus says to him. Up to 7 times? Jesus said to him, I do not say to you up to 7 times, but up to 70 times 7. Now, this is not like the magic mathematical number, you know. I know some of you ladies in the back of your mind, you're thinking, I got my notebook out. That's 242. You know, my husband has done that. You get to 490, bro, it's over. That's not what he's saying. It's like you take your number and you blow it out of the water. 490 times, it's unreachable. For the same sin against you, I'm not saying 7 times, I'm saying 7 times 70. And then multiply that again by 70. He goes on to teach this story here after he tells Peter that in verse 23. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven is like a certain king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. And when he had begun to settle accounts, one was brought to him who owed him 10,000 talents. Now, I got on Mr. Google and I started looking around, or Mrs., I don't know what. And I started looking around on there and I started doing some research on what 10,000 talents were equivalent to today. And really what it is equivalent to today is $6 billion with a B. $6 billion. This dude owes the king $6 billion. All right, verse 25. But as he was not able to pay, his master commanded that he be sold with his wife and children and all that he had, and that payment be made. The servant therefore fell down before him, saying, Master, have patience with me, and I will pay you all. Yeah, right, $6 billion, come on. Have patience with me, and I will pay you all. Then the master of that servant was moved with compassion, released him, forgave the $6 billion. Forgave it. You know what, son? You're forgiven. Go on your way. Live your life. He forgave him the debt. Verse 28. But that servant went out and found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 denarii. Now, 100 denarii is equal to about $12,000 today. So, I mean, a decent amount of cash, but compared to $6 billion, it's like pennies. He owes him 100 denarii. And he laid hands on him and took him by the throat, saying, pay me what you owe. Exactly. So his fellow servant fell down at his feet and begged him, saying, have patience with me and I will pay you all. And he would not, but went and threw him into prison till he should pay the debt. So when his fellow servants saw what had been done, they were very grieved and came and told their master, the king, all that had been done. Then his master, after he had called him, said to him, you wicked servant, I forgave you all that debt because you begged me. Should you not also have had compassion on your fellow servant, just as I had pity on you? And his master was angry and delivered him to the torturers until he should pay all that was due to him. So my heavenly Father also will do to you if each of you from his heart does not forgive his brother his trespasses. You see, what unforgiveness does is it places you in prison and tortures you and binds you and binds your faith. It binds your faith. You remember when Jesus was talking to the disciples and he says, whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. We always look at that in the positive sense. I bind the enemy. I bind his work in my life and I loose God's blessing on my life. Yes, but you can bind your faith as well. with unforgiveness. In this story, we see the man who was forgiven this insurmountable amount of money, forgiven. And it's a parable. It's an example. It's an analogy that Jesus is using for us. We're that man. And we have been forgiven all of our sin. All of it. There's passages that say that God remembers your sin no more. When you believe in Jesus, He remembers your sin no more. Gone. You're free to live for Him. Free of guilt. Free of shame. Free to live by grace. We have been forgiven. And yet, we turn around when somebody says something like a cross word, and we don't forgive. We're like this guy. We go to our brother who owes us pennies. We have him thrown in jail till he can pay us back. When we have been forgiven, the ultimate price, this unforgiveness binds us. It binds us up. It binds our faith. I mean, I'm gonna say what I'm getting out of this is that your faith will be hindered by unforgiveness. If you are believing God for something right now, and you're believing Him, and you want to see Him move in a mighty way in your life, and you're holding on to $12,000 that somebody owes you, and you're holding on to that, what I'm seeing is our faith is hindered in that moment. We have to be people who forgive. We have to be people who forgive. This expression of love, this forgiveness, is something that we often fall short in realizing the severity of it. So I want to ask you today, is there someone that you need to forgive? Is there someone in your life that you need to forgive? They hurt you bad. They made you angry. They said some horrible things. They did horrible things. Or maybe they didn't do enough. They didn't do what they should have. Is there someone in your life that you need to forgive? What if your faith hinges on it? What if the faith for your life hinges on this unforgiveness and you forgiving? So how do we break through? How do you break through the hurt, the anger? How do you break through all the emotions that come with these times? How do you forgive? How? How is it possible? Well, I want to tell you first of all to meditate on how much God has forgiven you. How much God has forgiven you for. I'm going to tell you something. As I was preparing this message, I had a hard time with this moment. Because God has forgiven me so much. I mean, there's times where I just think, I don't deserve any of this. He has forgiven me so much. Man, I've screwed some stuff up in my life. You know, I've done a bunch of things I wish I never had. I haven't done the things I should have done. And yet I can go to Him and I can cry out to Him, God, He's forgiven me so much. He's forgiven you so much. And when you take time to think about that, you take time to think about how much God has forgiven us. It's incredible. This is where we need to start. This is where you need to start with forgiveness. Start right here. Look at all that God has forgiven you for. And then, as you step into forgiveness, ask God for help. I promise you, I understand that there are some things that can only be forgiven by the strength of God. You're not going to be able to do it on your own. In fact, I say, don't do it on your own. Don't try. After you've meditated on how much God has forgiven you, you go to him and say, God, give me the strength. Give me the help I need to forgive that person. And he will. He will. And then you got to do something. You got to move. You got to pick up the phone and call that person. Send them a text. Write them a letter if you have to. Take the step to do something. Do something to step into that forgiveness. Do what it takes. And listen, if that person is gone and they've went on, then you take that forgiveness that you have, that you're walking through, and you offer it as a sacrifice to the Lord. God, I forgive this person. I'm giving you this. I'm giving you this forgiveness. I can't go to that person now because they're gone. But I'm giving it to you, Lord. I forgive them. In your strength, I forgive them. I forgive them. And then lastly, you got to let God handle the justice. Let God handle it. Paul writes in Romans chapter 12:19, he says, Beloved, do not avenge yourselves. Don't seek revenge, but rather give place to wrath. Give place to wrath. Give that to God. Give the wrath part to God. For it is written, vengeance is mine. I will repay, says the Lord. He goes on to say, if your enemy is hungry, feed them. If they're thirsty, give them something to drink. That's when you reap, that you pour coals of fire on their head. That's how he writes that. Basically, they know what's going on. They know what's happening. But as I was reading this, I was reminded of when Jesus was at the cross and they nailed his hands to that wood and they nailed his feet to that wood. And I remember his words, what he said. He said, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. Forgive them. In that moment, Jesus was looking for their forgiveness. He was offering their forgiveness in that moment. Vengeance is the Lord's. And I encourage you, what I've tried to make a practice in my life is to pray for the people who have hurt me. If Jesus did it, then I want to do it. I want to be like him. I want to be more like Jesus. I want to be more like him. If he can forgive in that moment, then I can forgive. I can forgive in my life. I can do it. I want to be a person who forgives like Jesus. What about you? What about you? As Jesus followers celebrating Christmas, we should be people of forgiveness. We should be people who forgive. You talk about having a strong church family. You get a bunch of people together that operate in true forgiveness. Bond will be so strong, no one can break it. The bonds in your marriages will be so strong because you're operating like the King. You're operating like him. You're being more like him. People of faith. So what I want to do, as you came through the doors, you received an index card. So I want you to get that out. If you didn't get a card, please just raise your hand. We've got a few guys up here front. There's a couple in the back there. Raise your hand high if you didn't get a card. Some of you guys have pens. There's some pens in the back of the seats. Just kind of pass the pens around. This is what I want to do as they're passing those out. I'm going to play a video of a song that I want us to listen to. And as we're listening to this song, what I would want you to do, if there is anything, any person, any situation that you need to forgive, I want you to jot it on this card. I want you to write it down on the card. Now, these cards will be private. You can keep them unanimous. We need one more. Shouldn't you guys need? Huh? Yeah. One more, John, up here in the front. It's a race. All right, so what we're going to do, we're going to listen to the song. As we listen, I want you to check your heart. Is there anyone that you need to offer forgiveness to in your life? Is there any situation? Is there anything in your life that you need to give forgiveness to? If there's not, if you are in a position where, well, I can't really think of anything right now, that's okay. Just write a note to the Lord, something that's on your heart about forgiveness, something that maybe He has been dealing with you about, and just write a message of how you're going to be moving forward with forgiveness and with these things in your life. I don't want you to leave your card empty, is what I'm saying. So if God's dealing with you about forgiveness, write that down. Write a faith message about how you are going to move forward in forgiveness. Or write down that person's name, or write down that situation that you need to offer forgiveness to. And it could be something small and simple, or something that no one else understands. So let's play this video, and let's take a few minutes and write this down.